Hi, this is Stuart from designandtechnologysupport.com. In this video, I demonstrate how to sketch in blue pencil and fine line pen the basic shapes ready to be marker rendered. So now we're going to move on sketching out the 2D basic shapes. So in order to do this, what we need to do is keep turning our paper. So I'm going to tear this piece of paper out of the pad to start with. If students are doing this in a classroom, what I would recommend is having another piece of paper underneath it so you don't pick up the textures of the workbench or a desk, because most of the time they have a textured laminate surface, and so you're going to get a better quality of line all round. So piece of paper underneath. Okay, it also makes it, quite often it makes it a little bit brighter, a bit whiter to see it. So what we want to do with our 2D sketching is start with a centre line. Centre line is critical and important. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to turn my page so I'm at the right kind of angle for my sketch line, so I'm comfortable, and I'm going to roughly sketch in where I want my centre line. So what I tend to do is I tend to do a ghost line. A ghost line is like a line where I'm pretending to do the line, but I don't actually touch the paper. And then let me do my real line, and I'm going to press lightly. Now for this demonstration, solely for this demonstration, I'm actually going to press considerably harder with my line. That's only so you can see it in the video. Then that's my centre line, or for my line of symmetry. Then what I'm going to do is make a decision about the bottom of my shape. So I'm going to sketch my line going across, and again I'm going to do that for the top of my work. Okay, so I've made decisions, and I'm not worried about the length of lines. Lines are just randomly sketched in different lengths, and if they're not long enough, we can always sketch another line. Then I'm going to do the sides of my first shape. So what I want to do is just make a decision using my centre line and looking at the space, trying to get a good proportion, trying to get a parallel line to my centre line. So just ghost line. Okay, there's my line. Okay, you can see it. That's how hard I normally press. So again, for the purposes of the video, I'll pencil that in. And then looking at my centre line to get balance. Okay, so approximate. So I could do a line about there. If you can just about see that, that's pretty much, it's very close. It's not perfect. So actually, I might just move it ever so slightly further out, and I'll press a bit harder. And we've got our two sketch lines with our centre line. And it looks approximately equal on both sides. And remember, this is a sketch. Sketches are far from perfect, so it doesn't matter. Then I'm just going to define my shape a little bit more for you, just by pressing a bit harder so you can see my lines. And what I want to do is I want to estimate roughly where the centre is. So where my pencil is now is probably about centre. So I want to do a line just above and just below. Okay, so I'm dividing my box into sections, and that is the first shape done. The reason I've done that is to help with when we come to add tone and marker rendering. It helps to break up the form from a big shape and guide the students in where they should add the tone. So if I was then doing my next shape, this is the key part now, is to try and get the shapes balanced on the sheet, is by trying to work out the distance between. And this is a good skill for the students to learn, because what we want to do is try and get a proportional shape. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same size, but what we want to do is have a good spacing between them. We don't want this next shape to be too small or too much bigger. It doesn't have to be level with the top and the bottom, but students could use those lines as a guideline as to where they want to sketch it. So I'm going to start again. I'm going to get my angle right. I'm just positioning my body. I'm going to start with my centre line. I look at my centre line and think I'm going to add onto this side here. So is my centre line in the right place? In this instance, no. So I'm just going to get my sheet again. I'm going to sketch my centre line just here. This is why it's really important to press lightly with your pencil. Then I'm going to add a width, a distance from my centre line just on this side while I'm at the right angle and parallel lines. Okay, and then I'll do the same over here. Okay, so ignoring this line, and of course, one of the things that we want to get students used to is not rubbing out. Okay, just because it's a mistake doesn't matter. We actually want to leave that in there. Then we'll add on the bottom of our object, and we can see our original sketch, so why not keep that line going? So we'll carry that line on. Okay, so we've got our bottom of our object roughly placed in. Then what we're going to do is about where we sketched this line before, we're actually going to continue that, and we'll sketch that line. And even though that line just goes slightly up at that side, doesn't matter. If I wanted to, I could just go over again. Again, repeating the need for, when you sketch, to sketch lightly. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the top of the cone to our sketch. So what we've got is the outside parts here. And again, remembering this line we don't want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the width of our shape slightly smaller now by adding a parallel line in here. So if I just make my pencil stand out. So again, that kind of distance, and we'll do the same on this side. Okay, that kind of distance. So now what I have for the top of my cone is I have my center line here, and I have the point here and the point here, the edge of my original shape. So now I decide on the top of my cone. So I'm going to look again to make it roughly the same height as here. So there's approximately my line. That's the point there on my center line where they cross. So I'm going to turn my page to be at about the right angle for me to do a ghost line, get that angle correct. So I'm comfortable, it feels natural, and there's a line. Okay, turn my page around. So you'll notice the key bit here is just turning the page to get an angle that you are comfortable in sketching that feels natural. Again, something like that. So then I've got the basis of my shape. I've obviously pressed hard for this purpose, but so to define that shape, so you can see it perhaps a little bit better, I'm just going to go over my lines, remembering that these are sketch lines, so it certainly does not have to be perfect. Okay, so if we get lines that stick out at the side, that's absolutely great. Then we'll do our line here, we'll do our line there, and then turn around at the bottom. Okay, so we have our cone shape, or essentially what we've got here is a cylinder with a cone on the top. That's what it's supposed to be as a 3D form. And we continue our sheet. So again, we find our next shape that we want to sketch. We start off with our center line, and then we start building our shape up. So in this case, this next shape was actually slightly bigger. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to plot in a series of parallel lines to begin with, because once I'm at the angle, instead of moving my sheet, it makes more sense to get lots of lines already plotted in, because then it's just a natural way of doing lots of lines. What I then decide to do is, okay, I'll decide on my starting one here, I'm just going to make a point on this top line, so about there, and I want roughly the same distance. So I'm just marking a small point. Now normally I would do that so light that you probably couldn't see it. Okay, and that's kind of quite important when we do construction lines, that you don't see them. So now what I want to do, so normally if I wanted a parallel line, I'd turn my sheet, and here we go, there would be a parallel line. However, this one, I actually want it to be an angled line. So I'm going to, instead of doing an angled line across, I'm going to turn my page more so that my natural line, there's my natural line like this, actually changes because I've turned the paper rather than turn me. So let's do my line. Something like that. You notice here, I've actually missed my point. So I've got a decision to make. I either adapt on this side and make the whole thing bigger, or I just do another line. Okay, my second line is a lot better. It goes through the point, it's a bit more controlled. Then I'll turn my sheet, looking at my new second line. Let's add in our shape. We've got our base bit there, turn it round so we go back to being parallel here. There's my line. Let's add in the bottom of my object. Now I've done it on that side. Let's try and balance. That looks wrong, it looks slightly too small, so we'll add a second line in there. We're going to go along here, kind of looking at where the line is, thinking, right, that's about the distance, so it probably looks about there. I would say looks right. Turn my sheet to get that angle, okay, that becomes more natural. Natural as in you're not forcing it, it's just the same kind of line that you're doing. Turn my sheet, and again now what I'm trying to do is ghost line between here and here. So I'm going to turn my sheet rather than me to get that right kind of line that feels comfortable, feels natural. You can see I keep turning my sheet until I get it right for me, and then there we go. Okay, so then what I do is I look at my shape overall and think, does it look right? Does it, maybe it's slightly wrong, maybe the width's wrong, maybe the angle's wrong. So now if you notice, I've turned my sheet the opposite way round. Instead of starting at this point, I'm going to start at this point, and actually I think to get the balance of my shape correct, what I need to do is just change the angle. I look at that now, I'm looking at it as a shape and thinking that looks right. So just for the purposes of this, as you'll see, I'm going to go over this now, just a little bit more defined as a line, like this, so you can see the shape highlighted a little bit better, ready for it to be fine lined. And again, all the time, moving my page to give me my shape. It's really important as well to keep all these lines in because we will use them for marker rendering and adding tone. And we need to continue the rest of the shapes. So the only other additional shape that I'm going to just demonstrate very quickly now is if we were sketching a circle or a ball or a sphere. Okay, probably the hardest shape to sketch overall. So notice immediately what I'm going to do. I'm actually turning my page an opposite way. What I'm going to start by doing is sketching about here. I'm going to sketch where there would be another shape here. I'm going to sketch a center line. That center line is going to be where the ball or the sphere is going to be. And then what I want to do is do what I call ghost lines. So I'm now making a motion circle. Now I find it easier to go anti-clockwise. You may find it easier to go clockwise. I don't. So that's the only reason why I'm doing this. And what I want to do is make this ghost line, and then eventually I make a decision. All the time when I'm doing this, I'm looking at both sides of my shape, roughly where the center line is, and you will probably not get the ball in with the center line in the center. Doesn't really matter, that was just a guideline. But within all of these lines, and there are lots there, I've probably got almost a really good circle. And realistically, when we sketch, incredibly difficult to get a perfect circle. And what I would say is if you want a perfect circle, use a circle template. But we're sketching and we're trying to learn these shapes. So what we could then do is looking at the lines that we have, we should be able to slow down, pick out the lines that we want, and we'll probably end up with a circle, which is pretty good, really, in sketching terms. And then we continue. So hopefully now, as you can see, what I've done is I've sketched out all of the shapes using my mechanical pencil. So I've got lots of lines. Every shape has, of course, my center line to plot where that shape should go. And I haven't been worried about lines crossing over, lines intersecting, or incorrect lines in any way. Okay, because this is all done with a blue pencil. We use blue for a particular reason. The blue will sit behind black as a layer, naturally with your eye. Black is the most dominant colour, and the blue has a nice way of working with the black and sitting behind it. It's almost like, I would say, if you're used to using something like Photoshop or Illustrator with layers, or even an app now like Procreate and all of the different layers, and that you can overlay something. Almost, if we said it traditionally, like having a piece of tracing paper over the top and using black over the top so everything then fades. That's why I like blue. The other reason as well is that it doesn't rub out, which also I find as an advantage because it then shows all of the working out. Okay, very much like if we were doing maths, and to get to the answer, you show all of the logical steps. So the next thing here really now would be just to make sure that I define any of my lines to make it clear exactly what I'm going to be fine lining, and just to make sure that the shapes I'm happy and correcting and thinking about, right, like on this one here, is this angle correct? Because this has got a nice angle, whereas this side actually, it looks a little bit flat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a new line on there because that didn't look right to me. So if I just open that up a little bit more, that's going to look better. And when I fine line and then when I add marker, this blue line will disappear a lot more and you won't notice it. You notice it now because I'm telling you to notice it, but beyond that you won't notice it. So my sheet is pretty much now ready to start looking at adding the fine line pen. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit there just to remind myself on this that when I come to do this, the lines that I'm actually going to highlight, and I'm just going to add a round on here where this part joins in here. So the two pens that I've got ready to use for finelining, exactly the same pen as I showed earlier, Japanese Unipin. I've got two versions. I've got 0.3 and 0.8. So the simple rule, we're going to apply the rule of thick and thin lines, and that is easy to do in that if you just remember that all outer lines, and this is particular for 2D sketching as well, all outer lines will be thick, so 0.8, all inner lines will be thin, 0.3. And what we want to do is actually put all of our construction lines in, and we're going to do that because by adding the construction lines in, it actually helps with adding the tone. So you can do it one of two ways. You can go around all edges with a thin line and then overlay with the thicker pen, so you've got the thicker outline, or you can just do the thin lines to begin with and then do the thick lines afterwards. The trick with using a fine line pen, if I just bring in another sheet, is also the angle of the pen when you add the fine line. If I hold a pen as I would a pencil at an angle like this and sketch a line, it's very thin. If I hold the pen vertically, it gives a thicker line, but exactly the same pen. So I could even do the entire sheet with one pen if I do thin lines at an angle and thicker lines vertically. But of course, if I use a thicker pen and do the vertical lines, I actually get a slightly thicker line again. And so then the contrast between this line and the thin line is bigger, and that's actually what we're after. So you make that decision on how you want to do it. In this instance, what I'm going to do my thin lines first. So again, what I want to do is get my sheet and my pad at the right angle, so I'm happy that it feels comfortable to sketch, and then I'm just going to sketch. So a little tiny bit more control perhaps than we used with our mechanical pencil. Nice and light and controlled, not too slow so we get wobbly lines because we don't like that, but at a good overall kind of controlled speed. Okay, so we're looking at, as you can see at the moment, I'm just looking at putting all of my center lines in, nice and thin, or any vertical lines that are similar that will also be thin. Okay, these two here would be thick, and even now you can see here this bit's slightly wrong. I'm actually going to have to make a thicker line here. So just to remind myself of that, because I see it now, I'm actually just going to put that in, and I'll go over that with a thicker line. Thinner lines, any construction lines, so just like this. Okay, there's a construction line to guide the end of my work, and then of course I'm just adding in further ones here as well. So we'll just add in this one quickly, and I'll just do the cube here at the end. And what I'm going to do here is just add in these guidelines, and these guidelines are really important for the rendering side. So then I'm going to switch my paper angle. I've got the same angle, look, as my marker pad, and what I'm going to do now is do the horizontal ones. So I, from my sitting position, haven't changed. I am comfortable, I'm sat in exactly the same place, haven't moved, and that is a nice comfortable place for me to be able to sketch lines. So I'm actually going to do that one, and I'm just going to put that one in while I'm at the right angle. Okay, let's do this one, because it's important that when you do the thick and thin lines, one of the things sometimes the students forget is lines on the inside, and they forget to do them because they're so strict in, I want that to be a thin line, I want that to be a thick line, and then sometimes they have missing lines. Okay, important that you try to do all of the lines. And if some are a bit thicker than you want, again, doesn't really matter. I'm actually going to go over these construction lines here just to make them stand out. Just while I'm doing that, I'll do these ones as well as construction lines. Okay, so we've got some thin lines. I'm not going to do the whole sheet right now. And then let's add in our thicker lines. So when we come in to do this, we know that if we have the pen more vertically, we can do a thicker line. So let's do that. So let's start off here with some horizontal lines. So I'm going to hold my pen more vertically, more controlled, but not perfect. I'm not aiming to start and end at exactly like the intersection of the lines. I just want to do it to control, but I still have that sketched feel about my work. So on here, this one now, control. What I want to do on this one, of course, is add in the thicker line here and here as the outside part of my shape. So that's way more controlled, that little section. And again, we'll have more instances of that happening. So on this one, for example, top line is going to be thick. This remains thin. This remains thick here. Or this, sorry, not remains, is thick. Okay, let's also do the bottom. Okay, we've got our thicker line. And then this bit here, we've got thick to thin here. If the line looks a bit odd because it suddenly jumps to thin, then I suggest you just go over it once. And it will become slightly thicker, but not the full thickness. Let's also get that bottom line in as a thicker line. Okay, and so on. So we'll just quickly add in these other lines. Okay, and then with our cube at the end here, so the bits that I actually want to be thicker are between my inner square, my guidelines. So let's just more controlled, just like so. Then, of course, what I will do, exactly the same as I did before, turn my page, get my same angle, get my angle that I'm comfortable at working with. Okay, get my work in a position so I'm comfortable even for the video of sketching. More vertical line and controlled. Okay, and if the line goes slightly wrong, it doesn't matter. If the line's slightly wobbly, it doesn't matter. Okay, while I'm doing that, I may as well just do this one because it's there and I want to do it. So there we go. And I may as well, even though I missed it before, but let's put the thicker line in. But remembering that inner lines are thin, so don't use the same pen. Okay. And we can continue. Okay, and I don't want to bore you anymore, so what I'll do is I will just do these and speed up the video. And here we have now our fine line sheet ready to start adding tone. Now, the sheet itself is far from perfect. There are mistakes here where this is actually a little bit too wide, and when you look at it proportionally here and here, it's wrong, but we're still going to carry on and use this because overall the sheet is going to be used to get an idea of how to render and how to add tone to 2D basic shapes.